Hook, in the noisy alien marketplace, where creatures of all shapes and colors shouted and traded goods. Something strange moved in the shadows, something small, filthy, and crawling like an animal. No one cared, no one looked, until one human stopped and saw something no one else dared to see. Captain Jack Maddox walked through the bazaar on the mining moon of Varan 7. He wasn't there to shop. He was just passing through, refueling, grabbing some supplies, and trying not to get involved in anyone's business. That was the rule, stay out of trouble, but trouble found him anyway. His boots slowed as he passed a narrow alley between two stalls. Something rustled in the trash. At first, he thought it was a sick animal, a scavenger, or maybe a mutated rodent. But then he saw the shape more clearly. It was a child. A very small alien child, crouched low, her skin a pale bluish pink under all the dirt. She wore nothing but rags, her ribs sticking out. She ate scraps like a starving animal, snatching half-rotted fruit and torn food wrappers with trembling hands. The worst part? Everyone around acted like she didn't exist. Disgusting little thing, muttered a vendor nearby, shaking his head. Should have been put down with the rest of her kind. Jack frowned. What is she? He asked without thinking. The vendor laughed. That thing? Some failed hybrid from the slave pens, I think. No name, no records. Not even worth a collar. Eats garbage, bites people. Don't waste your breath. But Jack didn't move on. Something about the girl's eyes, huge, glowing faintly in the shadows, stopped him. They weren't wild. They were terrified, empty, but still alive, not broken, just forgotten. He took a step closer. The girl growled softly and backed into the corner like a wounded creature. She held a broken plastic fork like a weapon. Her hands shook, but her eyes locked onto him. Jack knelt down slowly and opened his pack. I'm not gonna hurt you, he said gently. He pulled out a wrapped protein bar and placed it on the ground between them. She didn't move at first. Then, in a flash, she snatched the bar and shoved it into her mouth. She didn't even chew properly, just bit it wildly like she thought someone would take it away. People around him started whispering, "Crazy human. Feeding that thing? He must be out of his mind." Jack ignored them. He noticed something else. Something tiny around her neck, a collar. It was rusted and cracked, but it had strange symbols engraved on it. He squinted, trying to read it, but the girl hissed, covering it with her arms. Okay, he whispered, holding up his hands. I get it. She stared at him, chewing slower now. Her breathing calmed, just a little. Then she tilted her head. Curious, Jack smiled a little. There you are, he said softly. There's a girl in there. Not a beast. Suddenly, a guard walked up. Step away, human, he barked. That thing is filth. You're disturbing the peace. She's not hurting anyone, Jack replied calmly, standing up. She's hungry. That's all. She's not registered, the guard snapped. No ID, no tag. She's not even considered a citizen. If she causes more trouble, she'd be removed. Jack looked back at the little girl. She was still chewing, her eyes now watching him closely. No one had ever protected her before. No one had ever spoken for her. Jack nodded slowly. I'll take responsibility for her, he said. The guard looked at him like he was insane. You what? You want that thing? She's not a thing, Jack replied, his voice firm. She's a child. The crowd grew quiet. People stared. The girl looked up at him, not fully understanding his words, but something in her changed. Her body relaxed a little. Her eyes widened just enough to reflect something new. Hope. Jack extended his hand to her. Come with me, he whispered. I'll take care of you. She didn't move at first. Then slowly, she crawled forward and reached out with one trembling hand. And for the first time in what must have been years, someone touched her without pain, without fear, just kindness. The market would never forget that moment. The day the human saw a beast and called her a princess. Asterisk, the alien market buzzed with noise as always, but today something was different. People watched as the human walked through the crowd. with the filthy little creature by his side. Some pointed, others whispered, many just laughed. A few even looked angry. But Jack didn't care. He held the girl's hand gently, not tight. Not like a chain, but as if she was someone who mattered. The girl didn't understand. Her feet dragged. Her head hung low. Every few steps she flinched, expecting to be hit or shouted at. But nothing happened. No pain. Just warmth. Jack led her to a small supply shop near the shipyard. He needed water, food, and a blanket for her. The shopkeeper raised an eyebrow. "You sure you want to bring that thing in here, human?" He said, "She stinks. She's not clean. And she'll steal if you're not careful." "She's not a thing," Jack said calmly. "She's a child." The girl looked up at him with confused eyes. Child. That word again. What did it mean? Jack turned to her and knelt down. "My name is Jack," he said slowly, pointing to himself. "Jack." The girl tilted her head. He pointed at her and asked, "What's your name?" She froze. No one had ever asked her that before, a name. She had forgotten it, or maybe it had been taken away. Jack tried again, softly. "Your name. What do they call you?" Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Then finally she whispered something. It was not English, not Galactic Standard either. It was soft, musical, and very old, almost forgotten. Jack didn't understand the word, but the sound of it sent a chill down his spine. It felt ancient, powerful, important. The shopkeeper laughed behind them. "Even her name's broken," he muttered. "Should have left her in the gutter where she belonged." Jack stood up slowly, his face calm but cold. He stared at the man. "Maybe. The gutter is where you belong," he said quietly, "because you can't see what's in front of you." The shopkeeper turned red, but said nothing. Jack bought what he needed and left without another word. He and the girl walked toward the docking bay. She now held the blanket tight around her shoulders, her head still low. But Jack saw something in her, just a flicker, something that hadn't been there before. He spoke softly as they walked. "Your name. It's special, isn't it?" The girl glanced at him. He smiled. "Don't worry, I'll learn it, even if it takes forever." They reached his ship, a small but sturdy cargo shuttle named Rustflower. It wasn't pretty, but it was home. He opened the ramp and let her step inside first. She hesitated. She had never been inside a ship before, not freely. Her eyes scanned the walls, the lights, the soft hum of the engine. Jack watched her quietly. She didn't need orders or force. She just needed time inside. He showed her a small side room, the only spare space he had. It had a cot, a water dispenser, and now a blanket. He placed a clean shirt on the cot and looked at her. "You can stay here," he said. "It's yours." The girl didn't speak. She just stood there, not moving. Her eyes were wide and wet. Jack frowned. "Are you okay?" She slowly stepped forward and touched the bed. Then she dropped to her knees and curled up on the floor beside it. She didn't climb onto the bed. She didn't think she was allowed. Jack gently picked her up. She didn't fight. He placed her carefully on the cot. "There," he said, smiling. "Princesses don't sleep on floors." She stared at him. Her lips trembled then. Just for a second. She smiled, a tiny broken smile, but it was real. That night, Jack stayed up late in the cockpit. He stared at the stars through the viewport and thought about her. Who was she really? Where did she come from? What was that strange name she whispered? And why did she have a collar with ancient symbols on it? He didn't know the answers yet, but he knew one thing. He wasn't going to leave her. Not now, not ever, because while the rest of the galaxy laughed at her, Jack saw what no one else could see. She wasn't trash. She wasn't an animal. She was a lost soul waiting to be found, and maybe, just maybe, she was a princess. The ship was quiet. Stars passed slowly outside the window like falling snow in deep space. Jack sat in the cockpit, watching them. But his mind wasn't on the stars. It was on her. The little alien girl was asleep. Now finally, he had given her food, water, and a blanket. But she still curled up in the corner of the cot, as if afraid to stretch out too far. She didn't speak again. She barely moved. She didn't even ask questions. She was used to silence, used to being invisible, used to fear. Jack sighed. He wanted to give her space. But he couldn't leave her like that. Not when she looked more like a shadow than a child. He quietly stepped into the small side room where she slept. He knelt down beside her and gently reached to take off the dirty metal collar from her neck. It looked painful, too tight, rusted in some parts, and clearly too old to belong on a child. He wanted to help, but the moment his fingers touched the collar, she sprang up like lightning. She growled, her eyes wide with panic. Then she lunged and bit him hard on the forearm. Jack gasped, stumbling backward. Blood dripped down his arm, but he didn't shout. He didn't hit her. He didn't even raise his voice. She crouched in the corner, breathing fast, teeth bared, her body shaking all over, like she expected to be punished, like she'd learned the hard way that biting meant beatings. But nothing happened. Jack sat down on the floor, cradling his arm. He looked at her, not with anger, but with pain in his eyes, not for himself. For her, you don't have to bite anymore, he said quietly. I'm not like the others. She blinked, confused. No shouting, no fists, no pain. Jack reached into his belt pouch with his other hand and pulled out a small white medical patch. He pressed it to the bite wound and sighed. Then he looked at her again. Do you know what safe means? He asked gently. It means no one will hurt you here, not me, not anyone. She tilted her head. The word didn't make sense to her. Safe, it sounded like a lie. She had never known safety, only chains and scraps and the sting of whips. But this man, he didn't hit her. He didn't yell, he just bled quietly and still smiled. She slowly crawled forward on all fours, cautious like a cornered animal. Then she sat in front of him, close but still ready to run. Her eyes stayed on the bandage. She looked at his arm, then at his face, then she lowered her head. She was sorry, he could feel it. Not through words, but her eyes said enough. Jack smiled through the pain. You're stronger than you know, he said softly. You've survived all this time. But you don't have to fight alone anymore. She pointed at the collar on her neck, then touched it gently, hesitantly, as if asking, You still want to take it off? Jack nodded. Yes, if you'll let me. She looked down. Then slowly, silently, she turned around and lifted her hair. A signal, permission. Jack leaned closer. He used a small multi-tool to unlock the collar's old rusted clasp. It made a soft click, and then, for the first time in years, the collar fell from her neck and clattered onto the floor. The girl touched her bare skin. No chain, no cold metal, no weight, just skin. She looked at Jack in shock, as if this one act had changed everything, and maybe it had. You're free now, Jack whispered. Really free. She stared at the floor for a long moment. Then, slowly, she reached out and touched his hand. It was light, almost not there. But it was real. Her first touch that wasn't an attack. It was her first choice. Jack smiled. You have soft hands, he joked. She didn't understand the words, but she understood the tone. Something warm stirred in her chest. Something she didn't have a name for yet. But it felt like the beginning of something new. Later that night, Jack sat in the engine room repairing a cracked valve. The girl walked in slowly, holding a small piece of fruit he had given her earlier. She watched him work. She didn't say a word, but she sat nearby. She wasn't hiding anymore. She wasn't running. She was just there. And for Jack, that was enough, for now, because healing didn't come fast. But it started with trust. And tonight, he had earned the very first piece of it. Not through force, not through fear, but by bleeding. And not fighting back. Asterisk. The collar lay on the floor, old, rusted, and now useless. But Jack couldn't stop staring at it. It had strange markings, not just numbers or tags, but symbols, ancient ones, etched deeply into the metal as if someone wanted them to never fade. The little girl watched him from across the room. She was chewing slowly on dried fruit, her feet tucked under her blanket. She didn't speak. She didn't blink much either, just observed, like a child who had learned to trust quietly, not with words, but with presence. Jack sat down at the small desk in his cabin, placed the collar gently on top. He tapped his fingers on the table, thinking hard. Then he grabbed his datapad and scanned the symbols. The system took a moment searching records, archives, languages, everything. The result appeared on the screen. Jack's eyes widened. Origin. House Elavari status. Royal crest. Decommissioned after planetary fall location. Zerathi Prime. Lineage, royal blood. Jack stared at the words. His mouth went dry. Royal blood? He whispered. He looked over at the girl, still tiny, still quiet, still half wrapped in a blanket like a coon. But now she looked different. Not just a girl, not just a survivor. She was a princess. Why didn't I see it before? He murmured. The markings weren't prison tags, they were royal seal symbols of high birth. This girl. She hadn't been a pet or a slave. She had once belonged to the ruling family of an entire planet, and someone had hidden her deeply, turned her into trash so no one would ever know she survived. Jack stood up slowly, his hands shaking. He looked at her again. She tilted her head, sensing something had changed. Jack took a deep breath, walked over, and sat beside her. "I think I know who you are," he said softly. The girl blinked, her expression calm but curious. Jack pulled out the datapad and showed her the screen. Her eyes fell on the symbol, and suddenly she froze, not from confusion, not from fear, but memory. She stared at the royal crest, then slowly reached forward and touched it. Her tiny fingers trembled. Then she whispered something under her breath, just one word. It was the same word she had spoken in the market when he asked her name. Jack listened closely this time, and when she repeated it, the datapad picked up the sound. The system translated it. "Elari." Jack's breath caught in his throat. "Your name is Elari?" he asked. She nodded slowly. Jack smiled. "That's a beautiful name, Princess Elari." She blinked again, this time not in fear, but in shock. That word again. Princess, and this time, she didn't flinch when he said it. She didn't bite. She didn't hide. Jack continued. "I think they tried to erase you," he said. "They destroyed your home, your family, and threw you into the streets so no one would know you lived." He paused. "But you survived, Elari. You're still here." She looked down at her hands. They were thin, scarred, tired, but they still moved, still lived. Suddenly, an alarm beeped in the cockpit. Jack stood up and walked over to check. Its ship was approaching fast. He clicked a few buttons and zoomed in on the scanner feed. The ship had no beacon, no ID. But Jack knew those patterns. It was a bounty hunter vessel, heavy armor, fast engine, and hidden guns. Someone was looking for something, or someone. Jack cursed under his breath. He returned to Elari and knelt down. "We have to leave now," he said quickly. She didn't ask why. She just nodded. Jack grabbed what he could and rushed her to the cockpit. Elari sat in the co-pilot seat, eyes wide as stars flew past the glass. Jack's fingers danced over the controls. "We're going dark," he muttered. "No lights, no signal, no trace." Elari looked at him, confused. Jack leaned over and whispered, "Someone knows you're alive and they're coming." She looked down. Not scared, but something else, sadness. Like she had known this moment would come. Maybe she had once been told, "If they ever find you, you must run." Jack activated stealth mode and punched in new coordinates. A safe zone deep in an asteroid belt where few dared to go. As the ship slipped into the shadows of space, Jack sat back and stared at her. Elari, a lost princess with no throne, no family, and no crown. But she had something now. Someone him and Jack knew, no matter who came. For her, he would protect her with everything he had. The dark side of asteroid belt 417G was a place no sane person visited. It was cold, it was silent, and it swallowed signals like a black hole. But for Captain Jack Maddox and the little alien girl named Elari, it was the only safe place left. Jack's Ship, Rustflower, floated silently between the rocky giants. Its engines powered down. He sat quietly in the cockpit, watching the scanner. Still nothing, but he knew better. Bounty hunters didn't give up that easily. Behind him, Alari sat, curled up in the co-pilot seat, wrapped in the same blanket he had given her. She looked stronger now. Her skin was still pale, but cleaner, her eyes brighter. But her silence remained. She still didn't speak unless she had to, but now, she followed Jack everywhere he went like a shadow, not because she was afraid, but because she trusted him. Jack handed her a warm cup of broth. She sipped it slowly, carefully, her eyes never leaving his face. "You okay?" Jack asked. She nodded, then softly whispered, "Jack." It was only one word, but Jack smiled like she had given him a treasure. "You're doing great, kid," he said gently. "You're tougher than half the mercenaries I've met, but—" Just as he reached for his scanner again, the screen blinked movement. A ship had entered the belt, slow and careful, hiding behind rocks. Jack cursed. "They found us." Alari looked up, her fingers tightening around the cup. Jack stood up and powered on the ship. "No more hiding," he said. "We're getting out of here." The Rustflower roared to life. Engine humming, he punched in a new route towards an old smuggler path through the belt. It was risky, full of collapsing rocks and dead ends, but it was the only way to shake off a hunter. Alari sat beside him, eyes wide as Jack guided the ship through the maze. Huge chunks of rock floated past the windows, some spinning, some crashing into each other. The bounty hunter's ship followed, distant but steady. "They're not shooting yet," Jack muttered. "They want you alive." Alari looked down. Of course they did, if she was truly the last of the Elavari royal bloodline. She was more valuable than any cargo. The ship shook as they scraped past a narrow tunnel. Dust filled the air. The lights flickered. Jack clenched his jaw and focused. One wrong turn, and they'd be space dust. "Hang on," he shouted. Alari held the chair tight. The Rustflower dove downward into a deeper path, one barely wide enough for the wings. Alarms blared, warning of proximity impact. Behind them, the bounty ship tried to follow, but it was bigger, faster, but not made for tight turns. Jack twisted the controls and skinned through a narrow slit between two spinning rocks. The hunter's ship tried the same, but clipped one of the spinning asteroids. Boom! A huge burst of light filled the scanner. Jack's ship rattled, but kept flying. He looked back and grinned. "That'll slow them down." Alari exhaled for the first time. She wasn't smiling, but she wasn't shaking either. For someone who had once eaten from trash, she now flew through death with her head held high. Minutes later, they reached open space. Jack leaned back, wiping sweat from his forehead. They were safe. For now, he turned to Alari. "Nice flying, co-pilot," he said with a wink. She didn't understand the joke, but her lips curled just a little, a smile small but real. Jack changed course toward a hidden moon station, an old hideout he hadn't used in years. It was quiet, forgotten by the galaxy, perfect for laying low. As the ship landed, Jack looked at her. "We're not just running anymore," he said. "They'll keep coming unless we figure out why they want you dead." Alari looked down at her hands. She remembered fire, screaming, the sound of chains, but also a voice, a soft one. "You must live, Alari. No matter what, live," she whispered. "They burned my home." Her voice cracked. Jack leaned forward. "You remember?" She nodded slowly. "Mother. She hid me," sighed on the last Elavari. Jack's face turned serious. "So it's true," he whispered. "You're the heir to a fallen kingdom." Alari's eyes shimmered with tears. "But I don't want to be a princess," she said softly. "I just want to stay." Jack gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "You're not alone anymore," he said. "Whether you're a princess or not, you have me." And for the first time since he found her in the trash, she leaned against him, not like a scared animal, but like a daughter, like someone who believed in hope again. Asterisk, the hidden moon station was old and silent. No lights on the surface, no guards, no questions. Just shadows and silence, perfect for two souls trying to hide from a galaxy that wanted one of them erased. Jack powered down Rustflower and stepped out into the dim docking bay. The air smelled of dust and rusted metal. He checked his scanner. No. Life signs nearby. Good. They were alone. For now. Ilari followed him quietly, her blanket still draped around her small body like a robe. She looked around with wide eyes. This place wasn't warm or pretty, but it was the first shelter where no one tried to hurt her, and to her, that meant more than beauty ever could. Jack led her into a storage room that used to be a lounge for smugglers. There were broken chairs, a half-functional heating unit, and a couch with torn cushions, but he made it work. He fixed the heater, cleaned a corner, and found an old crate. To use as a table, this'll be our base for now, he said. No one comes here anymore, and if they do, we'll hear them before they hear us. Ilari sat on the couch, pulling the blanket tighter. She watched him quietly as he moved around, setting up supplies, checking gear, and sharpening a tool. She had started observing him more closely. She noticed the small things, how he never raised his voice, how he always shared his food, how he never looked at her with pity, only respect. That night, as Jack prepared 2 plates of warm food, he placed one in front of her. You don't have to eat fast, he said kindly. No one's going to take it from you. Ilari looked down at the food, then at him. She slowly picked up the spoon and ate with more care than before, still quiet, still watchful, but calmer. Then Jack said something without thinking. You know, this place could use a name. She looked up, confused. He smiled. You should name it, he said, pointing to the room. Every kingdom needs a name for its castle. She blinked slowly, then tilted her head. Castle? She repeated softly. Her accent was heavy, but the word was clear. Jack's eyes widened. He leaned forward, heart racing. Did you just say that? He whispered. She looked away shyly, but nodded. Jack couldn't stop smiling. Her first human word, not help, not no, not even his name. Castle. Perfect choice, he said warmly. This place is your castle now, Ilari. The moment passed in silence, but something had changed. She had spoken, not out of fear, but because she wanted to later that night. Jack was fixing a cracked wire panel near the docking tunnel. Ilari walked over silently, holding a small box. She placed it beside him and sat down. It was a repair kit. She had watched him enough to know what he needed. Jack glanced at her and gave a nod. Thanks, co-pilot. She gave him a tiny smile again. Her smiles were still rare, but when they came, they lit up everything around her. But the peace didn't last long. Suddenly, Jack's wrist buzzed with an encrypted warning. He tapped it open and read the message from an old contact. Hunters heading your way. Someone leaked info. They know she's royal. Jack stood up fast, his face serious. Ilari sensed the change. She stood too, alert and silent. He showed her the screen. She read slowly but understood enough. They're coming again? She asked. Jack nodded. Yeah, and this time they know exactly who you are. Ilari didn't cry. She didn't panic. She just looked around the dusty room and said softly, "Then we fight." Jack stared at her, stunned. Her voice was soft, but her eyes were hard. She wasn't the scared, crawling creature he'd found in the marketplace. She was different now. Still small, still quiet, but with a spark of something powerful inside her. He knelt down in front of her and took both her hands. You don't have to fight alone, he said. Do you understand? I'm with you. She looked into his eyes then, for the first time, she called him something new. Not Jack, not Captain. But softly, gently, she said, My human. Jack froze. His throat tightened. He smiled through the tears in his eyes. Yeah, he whispered. Yours. They had no army, no royal guard, no home. But they had each other, and that night, the forgotten princess and the quiet human made a silent promise. No matter who came, no matter how strong the enemy, they would not run again, because she had spoken, she had chosen, and her voice was no longer silent. The stars were quiet, but the silence was not peace. It was the silence before a storm. Captain Jack Maddox stood in the middle of the old docking bay, wearing his armor, checking his pulse rifle. His ship, Rustflower, sat prepped and ready just in case, but he wasn't planning to run anymore. Behind him, Ilari stood tall. Her blanket was gone. She now wore a simple tunic made from scraps, stitched together by Jack's own hands. It wasn't royal, but it was clean. It was hers. A long scarf covered the back of her neck, where the collar had once left scars. She wasn't hiding them. She just didn't need to feel them anymore. Jack turned to her. "You remember the plan?" he asked. She nodded. "You stall them." "I moved through the back tunnels," she said. "Get the data chip." Jack gave her a proud smile. "Good girl," he said, then paused. "No, good princess." She blushed slightly, not because she was embarrassed, but because, for the first time, she believed him. They had discovered the truth last night. An old security system inside the station still had memory logs. In those recordings, Ilari's mother, Queen Althea, appeared, her face tired and strong, looked into the camera and said, "To whoever finds this, my daughter lives. They will say she's gone, but she is not. Protect her. She is the last Elavari, and the galaxy will need her." The chip with that message was still inside the core panel. If they could get it out, they could show the truth to the whole galaxy. But the bounty hunters were coming fast. The sound of engines echoed through the station. Jack looked at the scanner. 4 ships, fully armed. No time left. He turned to Ilari and knelt down to her. "Eye level. This could get bad," he said. "I need you to be strong." She nodded without fear. "I'm ready," she whispered. "You taught me." Jack smiled and pulled a small necklace from his pocket. It had a charm, a broken piece of the old collar, now cleaned and polished. He placed it gently around her neck. "A reminder," he said, "of where you came from and where you're going." Then he stood and raised his weapon. The doors to the station burst open, and the hunters stepped in. They wore dark armor, visors glowing red. At the front was a tall alien man with a long scar down his face. He spoke coldly. "Hand over the girl, human." "This has nothing to do with you." Jack stepped forward, weapon ready. "She's not going anywhere," he said. "Not unless you want to fight." The man laughed. "You can't protect her forever," Jack shrugged. "I don't have to. Just long enough." As he fired the first shot, chaos exploded in the docking bay. Lasers flew, metal sparked, smoke filled the air. Ilari slipped away through the side tunnels just as planned. Her small feet ran quietly over the metal floor. She knew the path Jack had shown her, every corner of this place. Behind her she heard gunfire, shouting, crashing. But she didn't stop, not once. She reached the control core and opened the panel. Inside there it was, the chip, glowing faintly blue, the voice of her mother. Frozen in time, she grabbed it, tucked it into her pocket, and ran back. But as she reached the main hall, a figure blocked her path. One of the hunters, tall, strong, and ready. He raised his weapon, but before he could fire, Jack tackled him from the side, slamming the hunter into the wall. "Run, Ilari," he shouted. "Go." She hesitated, her heart racing, but Jack looked at her eyes fierce. "I'll be right behind you," he promised. She nodded and sprinted toward the ship. She boarded Rustflower and activated the distress beacon. It sent a coded signal across. The stars won that couldn't be blocked. Inside that signal was the chip, the message from her mother, the truth, broadcast to everyone, everywhere. Back in the docking bay, Jack fought like a storm. Even wounded, even bleeding, he didn't fall. He wasn't just protecting the girl anymore. He was protecting the future. Suddenly, the bounty hunters comes. Lit up. Emergency royal signal detected. The leader froze. What? All around the galaxy, screens lit up. A queen's voice played across space stations, capital worlds, pirate ships. "My daughter lives. Her name is Ilari. She is not lost." The truth could no longer be hidden. Jack stumbled into Rustflower. Wounded but alive, Ilari caught him, her arm shaking, her eyes full of tears. "You came back," she whispered. "Of course I did." Jack smiled through the pain. "I told you, Princess, I'll always come back." As the ship lifted off, hunters watched helplessly from the ground. Their mission had failed. The secret was out, and in the cockpit of that small, rusty ship sat the last royal of a fallen kingdom, and the man who became her father, not by blood, but by choice. She looked at Jack, then at the stars, and for the first time, she didn't feel lost. She felt seen. She felt safe. She felt home.